Thank you for attending this webinar, New York State Workers' Compensation Board, What Business Owners Need to Know. I'm your moderator, Jenny Alton from the New York Small Business Development Center Central Office. Today's presenters are Anthony Tomaselli, Ombudsman, Advocate for Business, and Walt Peretti, Associate Workers' Compensation Examiner from the Workers' Compensation Board. This webinar is brought to you by the New York Small Business Development Center, a network of 22 campus-based centers and outreach offices, which are located across New York State, along with a central office based in Albany. The NYS BDC is a U.S. small business administration resource partner. Our free advising, education, and advocacy services are made possible by funding from the SBA, New York State, and our host campuses. So you know, this session is being recorded. We will share it with attendees after the webinar. Attendees are muted and will not be on camera. Your chats will only be visible to me and to our presenters today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please don't hesitate to type them in the Q&A box as they come up. You can open Zoom's Q&A box from the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will address questions during pauses throughout the presentation and at the end. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for today, but for very specific questions that may take more time and detail to answer, or if we run out of time to answer all questions, you can get in touch with us by replying to the follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow. And with that, I will turn the time over to our presenters, Anthony and Walt.
Thank you so much, Jenny. As she just said, I'm Anthony Tomaselli. I'm an ombudsman for the Workers' Compensation Board, specifically the advocate for business. The role specifically exists to help business owners, educate business owners, and help you with your questions and concerns. I have my colleague, Walter Peretti, with me here. He's been with the Workers' Compensation Board for 27 years and is a subject matter expert on just about everything that you need to know as a business owner when it comes to the board. So I'm glad to have him here to support me. And we're just going to run through a presentation. We're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, some of the common issues that we hear about from business owners, and tell you a little about what our office can do to help you. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn my camera off so you can't see my face as I'm presenting, and we'll get right into it. So the title on this presentation is What You Need to Know, specifically you being business owners or employers in New York State. You're very important to the state. You help us drive the economy. You give folks jobs. You should feel really proud of yourselves for taking on that responsibility of being an entrepreneur. But I know it's a big responsibility. And amongst the many things that you have to be responsible for when you want to be an employer in New York State, workers' compensation is one of them. So I'm going to jump into it a little bit. What is the Advocate for Business Office? Okay, so we're here at the Workers' Compensation Board. The office is created by law with this specific purpose to help businesses, assist you with your coverage and compliance problems, and educate business owners. That's kind of what we see as really the best thing that we can do. Look for opportunities and partners like the New York State Small Business Development Centers to kind of put us in a position to speak to business owners and educate you. What do you need to know? How do you take care of your workers? How do you take care of yourself? How do you stay out of trouble? We want to try to help you do that. In addition to going around and doing presentations like this one, we do them live, we do them on the web. Really, anybody who will give us an audience and a chance to speak to business owners, we really want to be there. But we will also sit down and talk to you. If you've got questions or concerns or ideas, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to talk to you. So you're going to get our contact information during this presentation. And I hope some of you might feel comfortable reaching out and just sharing your experience as a business owner who's had to get workers' compensation or disability or paid family leave for your employees, and that you would talk to us about that. We do report directly to the chair of the Workers' Compensation Board, which basically means that if you talk to us, your concerns are going to be heard. You know, we're not way down the org chart fighting our way through a lot of bureaucracy to get our issues. You know, we're here specifically to conduct this particular type of work, educating business owners, but also take the feedback that we learn from you and bring it back directly to the chair of the board. So, the big thing is workers' compensation insurance. It's Workers' Compensation Board. We were created primarily with workers' compensation in mind about 100 years ago. That's the largest piece of the puzzle that we deal with here at the board, and that's workers' compensation insurance. Workers' compensation insurance is specifically covering on-the-job accidents, injuries, and illnesses. So this is when somebody gets sick or hurt at work, doing work, making a living. That's when workers' compensation will step in and provide both medical and wage replacement. And it exists to help both the employers and the employees. And I stress that a lot. Everybody thinks all the time about helping the employees, the ones who actually get hurt and get the medical and wage replacement. But this is a benefit for employers as well, because what this does is it creates this no-fault system that when one of your employees gets hurt or sick on the job, that the system will step in and take care of them, that you're not going to be liable for a lawsuit for putting that employee in that situation, and also kind of helps get all this stuff moving, that we have a system in place. Okay, what do we do when somebody gets hurt? Who is going to take care of this person when they get sick, and allow them to get through the process of recovering so they can come back to work, and then you as an employer can get back to your business and keep your business running smoothly as you need to and as you should. So it's really here not just about the employees, but it's about protecting you and your business. The other coverage that we deal with is disability benefits insurance. This is off-the-job accidents, injuries, and illnesses. This comes out of the employees' contributions. And this type of insurance really exists to provide limited wage replacement for when somebody, is struggling with an illness or an injury and they can't work, that they can kind of help take care of their family. There's no medical benefits coverage. The idea is that in another type of insurance would cover, specifically maybe the health insurance policy that employee has would take care of the medical. But this is to provide wage replacement so that their families can continue to eat, basically, while the person recovers. You can receive a wage replacement of up to $170 a week for up to 26 weeks. And then, so who needs all this different coverage? Well, businesses with employees need coverage. That's really what it comes down to. And in most cases, if you have employees, you're going to need coverage. So the answer feels like it's more often than not, yes. Do you need coverage? Yes. So specifically, though, we should probably talk about who exactly is an employee. That's where there can be a little bit of confusion on that. When you're talking about a for-profit business, anyone providing any services for a for-profit business can be considered an employee. They don't even need to be getting paid. They just have to be providing a service for the for-profit business. And when it comes to, responsibility for workers' compensation insurance, you're going to be responsible for them. When you're looking at nonprofit organizations, that's when the compensation kind of becomes a little bit more of a factor, with a few exceptions, such as clergy or teachers in a religious or educational nonprofit. In most cases with nonprofits, if the person is getting paid, they're an employee that requires workers' compensation coverage. So who doesn't have to require workers' compensation coverage? Because, that's what everybody wants to know is who doesn't need it, and can I not have to pay for this thing? So who doesn't need to get it? Well, sole proprietors. If you're a sole proprietor and you have no employees, you're not required to have workers' compensation insurance. If you're a partner in a partnership with no employees, you don't need to have workers' compensation insurance. Same thing goes for 1 or 2 person corporations or LLCs if the only people who are getting paid are the members of the LLC. And if you can see there's like a theme or a pattern to this, is if you as the business owner or the partner in owning the business, if the only person who's at risk, conducting this business is you, and you want to absorb that risk all on your own and not get an insurance policy to cover, the possibility that there's an accident or injury, you can not get workers' compensation insurance. So once you start bringing in employees, you have to take a little bit of responsibility for their health and safety. And that's why we require you to have workers' compensation insurance here in New York State. Premiums. Everybody wants to know, how much is it going to cost me, and how do they decide how much it costs me? Well, your premiums are determined by a classification code. Every type of job, gets slotted into these classification codes, and the classification codes are based on how hazardous the type of work is. You know, if it's a very dangerous occupation, the code is going to determine a higher premium. Those rates are determined based on every $100 of payroll. Factors that the insurance companies consider is the size of payroll, your safety history. You know, if you have no history of accidents or injuries on the job, that's going to be taken into consideration. It's just like your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance. If you get into a lot of accidents or you have a lot of workplace injuries, you're going to have a higher premium. Your insurance policy is going to be audited on a regular basis. They're going to be checking to make sure you still have the same number of employees that you told us about in the beginning. You know, have you had any issues or concerns? Those things will be factored in. And then, of course, each company does get to factor in the administrative expenses of providing the insurance policy, because I do want to stress that you're going to get your workers' compensation insurance not from us, not from the Workers' Compensation Board. We're just basically a regulatory agency overseeing this whole system. You're going to go out there and get your insurance from another carrier, a private carrier who provides workers' compensation insurance. And then same thing goes with disability insurance and the paid family leave. I specifically haven't mentioned paid family leave yet. We're going to get to that at the end of the presentation. So specific coverage issues, kind of bringing this up just to give you an idea of the things that we hear about here at our office, the things that you might want to look carefully at as you're running your business. When we're talking to sole proprietors and partnerships, including LLCs, LLPs, and corporate officers, people want to know, do I need to have coverage or not need to have coverage? I kind of do want to point out there, though, even though I mentioned that you don't necessarily need to have coverage as a sole proprietor or a partnership for, if you want to have coverage, if you're worried about the risk of an accident or injury and how you as a business owner is going to take care of your family and yourself, if you have an accident or injury, you can go out there and get coverage if you want it. You're not barred from getting it. We answer a lot of questions about independent contractors and subcontractors. That things can get a little bit complicated and messy when you're working with, you know, subcontractors and then even like second tier subcontractors, or who is an independent contractor. There's different rules with your taxes. We'll talk a little bit later about how that specifically gets taken into consideration with workers' compensation insurance, but that's an area where there's lots of confusion, and hopefully we can help people deal with those things. We get a lot of questions about family members. You know, do I need to cover my son if they come help me out in the office? Or if my cousin comes work for me, they're doing me a favor, do I need to cover them? You know, I'm going to tip you the answer is yes. Like we said before, if you got anybody providing services for a for-profit business, you're probably going to need to have coverage for them. Domestic employees, that's also something we hear about and talk to a lot. You know, people want to know, do I need to have coverage for my home health aide? Do I need to have coverage for my nanny? Those situations get very nuanced. And so we really just kind of want to put it out there that you should talk to us about these issues. You should reach out to us when you're thinking about hiring somebody in that situation, and make sure, you know, don't make any assumptions. Talk to us at the board, talk to your insurance professionals, ask a lot of questions. So before we get deeper into the presentation, we kind of like to throw out a little sample, see how much people understand about, you know, just the idea of responsibility and accountability when it comes to workers' compensation. So we've got a scenario here. Jen wants to start a tutoring business. She's going to hire independent contractors to do all of the tutoring. The parents are going to contact her, and she, Jen, is going to match those children with one of her independent contractor tutors. The parents are going to pay the money to Jen. Jen is then going to pay the tutors. So the question to everyone else here is, do you think that Jen is required to get workers' compensation coverage or insurance for these independent contractors who are working for you? If you've been listening carefully in the presentation, you might know the answer to this, but if not, go ahead and take a guess. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about it before I spoil it and give you the answer. All right, as some of you probably correctly guessed, Jen is required to get workers' compensation insurance for her independent contractors. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit in the next slide here. When you're talking about independent contractors, we're going to want to look at how the work is being done. How is this supposed independent contractor conducting the business that they're being paid to conduct? And probably the most important terms to think about in this case is direction and control. You know, who's deciding when and where and how the work is to be done? Is the independent contractor free to do whatever needs to be done at their own leisure? Or is the hiring businesses telling them where to be, what they have to do when they get there, and how they have to do it? So this is separate from like how you file your taxes, whether or not you want to, you know, claim an employee, the expenses you pay somebody as a 1099. That's not necessarily going to mean that you're not responsible for their workers' compensation insurance. It's, are they doing business for you under your direction and control? You know, when you start getting into the nuance of these situations, they're going to look at things like the FEIN number of the businesses involved. You know, is there a separate business? Does this supposed independent contractor have their own business with their own FEIN number that they do business as? So there's always a lot of nuance. We do have a great section on our website, wcb.ny.gov, where it'll kind of break down specific instances, specific examples of types of work an independent contractor could do. But I also kind of bring it up that here we are here today, the Advocate for Business Office. You could reach out to us and ask myself or Walt, and we'll kind of try to help you figure out, you know, whether or not you need to have coverage for one of your 1099 employees. With construction, we kind of get into a lot of the same kinds of questions, you know, like who's responsible for which workers on the job site. There's something called the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. Construction Industry Fair Play Act essentially says that if a worker's on a job site, they're presumed to be an employee of another company on the job site unless they can prove that they own their own business. Okay, if you want to find more information on that, you can go to the Department of Labor's website. They're really the ones that kind of oversee and regulate that piece of legislation, the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. But that essentially kind of coming down to, like, you can't just say, well, he's not mine, he's an independent contractor. If somebody's on a job site and they don't own their own business, they're going to look at who else is on the job site, and they're going to, you know, try to figure out what other company that they belong to, because that worker is going to be presumed to be an employee of somebody else if they can't be proved to be the owner of their own business. So general contractors in general, you're going to be responsible for everybody on your job site. So if you're a general contractor, you're hiring subcontractors and they don't have workers' compensation coverage and one of their workers gets hurt, you as the general contractor are going to be liable for that accident or injury. And so that's kind of, you know, we put that out there to let you know that stay on top of your subcontractors. You know, one of the best pieces of advice that we can give you is to ask your subcontractors to make you a certificate holder on their policy. And then you can give those certificates to your insurance company. And there's going to be two benefits to that. If your subcontractors are adding you as a certificate holder on their insurance policy, that way you'll be notified if there's a lapse in their coverage. Like, say one of your subs has workers' compensation insurance the day that you bring them on board and put them to work, but then they don't pay their bill and their coverage lapses. You want to be notified when that happens. And if you're a certificate holder, they will notify you. But then also, once you become a certificate holder and you have that proof of coverage from your subcontractors, you can share that information with your insurance carrier, and they will take that into consideration in regards to your policy, that, you know, you are staying on top of your subcontractors and you're making sure that they do have the appropriate coverage that they need to have for their employees. So I'll talk a little bit about penalties. Penalties are big. You know, we consider workers' compensation to be extremely important. We want to make sure that if there's an accident or injury to somebody on the job here in New York State, that they get taken care of. So if you don't carry the appropriate workers' compensation insurance coverage, the penalties are very steep. It can be up to $2,000 for every 10 days out of compliance. If you have up to 5 employees, we're looking at a misdemeanor. If you have more than 5 employees, it's a Class E felony. And as you can see, there are additional penalties on top of that $2,000 for every 10 days. So you're looking at, you know, up to $72,000 a year, plus another $5,000 to $50,000. And you can even go to prison for this. Misclassifying your employees, which means, you know, telling your insurance carrier that your workers do different, less dangerous work than the work that they're actually doing. The penalties for that are the same as if you didn't have insurance at all. So make sure that you're communicating very clearly with your insurance carriers about exactly what kind of work your people are doing. Also, one thing to keep in mind, if you fall out of compliance and you get a penalty for not having workers' compensation insurance and you don't address it right away, you could end up on a debarment list. The debarment list is very bad. You don't want to be on the debarment list. If you're on the debarment list, you can't get permits to do any work. You can't get government contracts with a local or state government. And it's also kind of used, the debarment list is used for a little bit as a vendor responsibility check. Even private entities that don't necessarily have to follow the debarment list, they might look and see if you're on the debarment list and choose that, hey, if I see a company that's on the debarment list, that's kind of one of their ways to check and make sure if you're a responsible employer. And if you're on there, they're not going to hire you. So this is definitely something you want to stay away from. The best advice that I can give you about staying off the debarment list is contacting the board. We do have an appeal process, and we can help you. We can help you kind of dig into these things. If you get a penalty, and maybe you weren't supposed to get a penalty, maybe the circumstances are different than what we think is going on, reach out to us, contact us. If you get any letters or any type of communication from the Workers' Compensation Board whatsoever, you should respond to it right away. Don't, I see we say on the slide here, don't stick your head in the sand, but really, just don't ignore it. I mean, we run into so many circumstances where problems become so much bigger than they really need to be because people just don't address them right away, or they're not sure what to do, or they're scared. We can help you. We can help you. If the penalty is not appropriate, we'll make sure that it gets taken away. Or even if it is appropriate, I think it's important to know that we here at the board, we can actually do offers of settlement and reduce the penalties, because the most important thing to us here is that you get the right coverage and you protect yourself and your workers as the law describes. So that's something that you should keep in mind as well. If you do get a penalty letter from us and it's got a big scary number on it, don't get too scared. If you go out and you get the appropriate coverage that you were supposed to have in the first place and we clear everything up, we can reduce those penalties significantly. Often down to really just kind of what it would have cost if you were to have gotten the policy that you needed to get in the first place. So again, big takeaway here is if you get a letter or a penalty or any communications from the Workers' Compensation Board, respond to it. And if you're not sure how to respond to it, you're going to get the Advocate for Business contact information during this presentation. You can reach out to us and we will help figure out how to get you to the right person that you need to get your issue taken care of. So I'll talk a little about good stuff, I guess. Talking about bad stuff, I'll talk about good stuff. Good stuff meaning I can give you some advice on helping you keep your costs down. That kind of advice really, boils down to some simple tasks like making sure that your employees are classified correctly. If you don't classify your employees correctly, I kind of sort of mentioned before, if you classify people as doing more dangerous work than you're really doing, that's just as bad as classifying them as doing less dangerous, because you're going to pay more money for that. So make sure, again, communicate with your insurance carriers, make sure that you're identifying your workers with the correct classification codes. If you do have an accident or injury, follow your claim and stay informed and be responsive. Your ability to respond to these situations and help, get your employees through this process, it's going to reflect positively on you with your insurance carrier. They want things to go as easily as possible as well. And then the most important thing is operate safely. If you don't have any accidents or injuries on the job, your premiums are going to stay down and your workers are going to be able to keep working. You're not going to be interrupted by someone having to, go to physical therapy or recover or do whatever. You can just keep doing business. And that's what you all do as business owners, right? You want to keep doing business. One recommendation that we give to you is create something called a labor management safety committee. It doesn't need to be something extremely complicated or overly formal, but really we're just recommending that, people, your workers, your labor and your management get together on a regular basis and discuss safety in the workplace. Like go around, visit the workplace, review the equipment, decide your different types of procedures, look and see what's happening. Sometimes just talking to your employees will alert you to issues that are obviously unsafe. but you're not aware of them because nobody's telling you about it. And your employees might not feel comfortable or empowered to share that information with you. They might be worried they're going to get in trouble. But if you create this environment, this labor management safety committee that can actually, intentionally have these conversations about safety procedures and training and things like that, the end result would hopefully be a safer workplace, less accidents, less injuries. Something else we like to talk about is a program called the Workplace Safety Prevention Incentive Program. This is run out of the Department of Labor, but if you follow this program and you participate in this program, which requires you to voluntarily set up a safety, a drug and alcohol prevention, and a return to work program. You don't actually need to do all three. You can do any one of the three or all three. But this is kind of like, some of you might be familiar with those defensive driving classes that you sign up for that give you a break on your insurance. If you sign up and you voluntarily do these classes, you can get up to 10% of your workers' comp off in the first year and up to 6% in the second or third year. So if you're bringing on a lot of employees and you got, a pretty fair amount of payroll, this could really help save you some money. So that's, safety return to work, drug and alcohol program. Department of Labor has information about this on their website, but again, you can always reach out to us if, a month or two from now, you're like, you know what, I think I do want to see if I can do that safety program with the Department of Labor and get a break on my insurance. Reach out to the Advocate for Business to Workers' Compensation Board, and we'll connect you to the Department of Labor, and we'll get you squared away with that program. Department of Labor also has this other really cool thing where they will do on-site safety consultation at no cost. I know whenever I talk about this program, people get nervous, like, I don't know if I want to invite any government officials to come and snoop around my workplace. This program doesn't exist to go and try to catch people doing the wrong thing. This is a program where we try to help people. There's no cost to it, and I'm telling you, we're not going to use this as a way to try to slam you for running an unsafe workplace. If you sign up for this, you really will get professionals to come to your job site or come to your workplace and do an on-site safety consultation. You might get some really good advice from them. So something else to think about. And again, there's the telephone number there for them is 518-457-2238. But again, if you need help with this, or you decide later on you want to connect or get one of these on-site consultations, you can reach out to us and we'll connect you with the right folks at the Department of Labor. So I'll just do a quick review of your responsibilities as an employer. Get the insurance that you need. If you have employees, get them covered. When you get an insurance policy, your carrier is going to send you a poster in the mail with the rest of your policy information. That poster is there for you to display so that all your workers can see and know that, yes, they're covered, as the law requires. It also has the information, the carrier information, what you would need to do if there is an accident or injury. So that's important information for you to share with your employees. So display your required poster. You got to do it. The word required is there. You're required. If you have any claims, report them. You're required by law to report claims within 10 days of the accident or injury. But really, don't wait. If somebody gets an accident on the job, and, a lot of people wonder, what's a good rule of thumb? How do I know what should be reported as a claim or what should not be reported as a claim? A good rule of thumb that was given to you once: if you need to render first aid more than once for the injury, it might be something that's serious enough to be a workers' compensation claim. We're not talking about a boo-boo that needs a Band-Aid or something like that, where if we start having to go back and revisit the injury and, a simple, basic one-stop first aid is not enough. That means we got to start thinking about, hey, do we have to, file a claim? Sometimes they don't go any further, but you do want to get these wheels in motion, because the faster you get the injury or the illness treated, the faster that person comes back to work, and that's better for everybody. Beyond that, you should also be aware that your employees cannot be discriminated against if they file a workers' compensation claim. Employees can only be terminated for valid reasons if there's an active claim going on. So that's another thing people wonder, like, I can't fire somebody because they have a workers' compensation claim. Or, sometimes you'll hear about, those horror stories or anecdotes about employees trying to file a claim because they think they're about to get fired, and they believe that, You won't be able to terminate them if they have a claim going on. If you have a valid business reason for terminating an employee, you can still do it, but only in those circumstances. And then finally, I do want to mention that employees are eligible for workers' compensation coverage regardless of their citizenship or immigration status. So I'm just going to jump into the paid family leave part of the presentation now. Paid family leave it's not that new anymore. Law was passed in 2018, but you know, a lot of people still learning about it, still getting familiar with this idea of the paid family leave. So what is paid family leave? Well, this is protection for bonding with children, caring for sick family members, and also if you've got a family member in the military who's getting deployed overseas, recovering paid family leave kind of helps cover and gives you paid time off, job protected paid time off when these things happen for your employees. A little bit more detail on what it means to bond with a child. This covers both birth, adoption, all three, it's not both, it's all three, birth, adoption, and foster care. Those are all qualifying events. When you're talking about caring for a family member, it can include a spouse, domestic partner, child, stepchild, siblings, parent, step-parent, parent-in-law, grandparent, grandchild. Even if the family member is outside of New York State or outside of the United States of America, you can use your paid family leave benefit to take care of them. So you as employers need to be aware that you're here in New York State, your employees are entitled to this. When you got a family member with a serious health condition, what we're talking about with serious health conditions, inpatient care or continuing treatment or supervision by a healthcare provider. You know, it's not, you know, my cousin stubbed her toe or something like that. You know, we'll be serious. With the pandemic that we all just experienced, in many cases, a COVID-19 diagnosis can be considered a serious health condition. So with the military deployment, I don't know how many people on this webinar have experience with military families, but it's a challenge to be a part of a family with a member who's in the military. You experience things like short notice military deployments, mandatory military events, you know, recovering from an extended deployment, dealing with personal issues like PTSD, you know, post-deployment requirements, responsibilities, training events, things like that. Many of these things can qualify. So if you have employees who are in that situation and you want to support them, let them know that they can reach out. You know, we have a great paid family leave here, attorney on call every day. So if you have paid family leave questions, you as a business owner or one of your employees has a question, you can reach out to us and we connect them with an attorney at any time who can answer all kinds of questions about what exactly you're entitled to and what circumstances, you know, it would allow you to access this benefit or your employees to access this benefit. Most private employers with one or more employees in New York State are going to be required to have paid family leave insurance in place. As a sole proprietor, you can voluntarily opt in. You know, that's one of the things that we hear from employers is, well, my employees get to have this, but what about me? You can voluntarily opt in. If you do it within the first 26 weeks, you got no waiting period. If you decide after the fact, like later on, you let those 26 weeks go and you say, you know what, I do want to get myself covered for paid family leave, that's a 2-year waiting period. I also kind of want to mention that your paid family leave, that just like the disability insurance, that's coming out of the employee's wages. So you as the employer, you're not paying for that. You just got to make sure that you set it up that your employees are making the mandatory contributions. It's coming out of their side of the math there. So what's the time off and wage benefit? Employees can take up to 12 weeks of paid family leave at 67% of their average weekly wage, which is capped at 67% of the New York average weekly wage. An employee's average weekly wage is based on their last 8 weeks of pay before they take the PFL. That's what we call paid family leave, PFL. And in 2023, we've got the New York State average weekly wage at $1,688.19. Employees can take paid family leave all at once or intermittently, but it has to be in full day increments. You can't like take an hour of paid family leave here or 2 hours there. It's got to be full day increments. So I kind of sort of mentioned this already, who pays for the coverage. This is paid for with employee contributions, unless you voluntarily choose. As an employer, I should have mentioned that you can voluntarily choose to cover their PFL for them if you want to. It's not very expensive. It's actually pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. So some of you might want to do that for your employees. Department of Financial Services, DFS, they're the ones that set the contribution rate to match the cost of coverage for the employees. And we've got information on our paidfamilyleave.ny.gov website where you can find out a little bit more about how much it costs and figure out what deductions might need to be for your employees. So that's at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/cost. So who's eligible? Covered employees are eligible to take PFL for a qualifying event if they work a regular schedule of 20 or more hours a week after 26 consecutive weeks of employment. And if you're a part-time worker, if you work a regular schedule of less than 20 hours a week, you are eligible, but after you've worked for 175 days. And those days don't need to be consecutive. So I understand that's kind of that. These are the confusing things that we talk about all the time, which really, kind of boils down to reach out to us and ask us questions. If you're not sure about your employee, and even if your insurance agent is not sure about your employee and whether or not you need to get them covered, give us a call. You're all going to get our contact information. Give us a call and we'll help answer these questions. And once again, citizenship or immigration status is not a factor in employee eligibility. Can an employee waive coverage? It's not optional for most employees. For some part-time or seasonal employees may qualify. Employees can waive coverage if they work fewer than 20 hours a week and won't work 175 days in a year. If they regularly work 20 or more business hours a week, but they're not going to be in employment with that employer for 26 consecutive weeks. Really what we're looking at in many cases is seasonal workers. In those cases, again, take a look and see if you can figure out if that they're not going to be with you for 26 consecutive weeks or 175 days, whichever the circumstance applies to you, that you can waive the coverage. Can a waiver be revoked? Yes, it can be revoked, and it'll happen automatically. You as an employer don't necessarily need to do anything. If an employee's schedule changes so they no longer qualify for the waiver will automatically be revoked within 8 weeks of the schedule change. Employees begin making those contributions along with any retroactive amounts due. So just a quick review of your responsibilities with paid family leave. Make sure you get the coverage. And just like I mentioned with the workers' compensation insurance, disability insurance, your paid family leave coverage, you're going to get that from private carriers, either out there in the marketplace. I can also mention that New York State, we do have something called the New York State Insurance Fund. You can get coverage from them for your workers' compensation insurance. But they're kind of acting like a independent business as well. So I would treat them just like shopping around. They're one other company that you can reach out to and find out. The best thing about the insurance fund, though, New York State Insurance Fund, they have to give everybody a policy. It may not be the cheapest policy, but they can't deny you coverage. Where in some cases the private carriers can deny you coverage, like if you have a history of bad accidents and things like that. But back to paid family leave here. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. You definitely want to make sure your employees know about paid family leave and know that they're entitled to it, and that you provide your wage information to your insurance carrier when an employee requests paid family leave so that they know how to calculate the benefit properly. Again, we do have a really great paid family leave website, paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, and you can visit the employer section there for answers to all kinds of questions. I'm going to kind of speed through a couple slides talking about COVID. Just as I'm sitting here wondering, like, do we really need to keep sharing this information? You find out, we see people are catching COVID again. So we never know. I mean, I don't think things are going to get like they were back in 2020 and 2021, but we should kind of be aware of how it can impact us, and particularly how it can impact your workers' compensation and your PFL. So I'm going to share a little bit of information here. If you have a positive COVID test and you want to file a claim, you're going to have to let your insurance carrier know. And really, this doesn't seem to be so common. We're not necessarily seeing people being forced into mandatory quarantines and not being allowed to work anymore. but it could change. Like, you never know, things could change again, and if that happens, we might be seeing these kinds of situations again. If the COVID-19 quarantines, you can get leave if you're being forced into a quarantine situation. Again, I know this isn't really happening right now, but when it was happening, and if it ever does happen again, workers can be entitled to job protection and financial compensation if they're forced into a quarantine. Or, if you remember, in some of those cases, many of us had children, dependent children, who might be forced into a quarantine, and we're quarantining with them, which means that we can't go to work, we can't run our businesses, we can't do our things. So, how do we handle that? Well, we try to address that with our coverages here. So eligible workers can get a combination of paid family leave and disability benefits to help support them if they were ever forced into a quarantine situation like this. You can get up to 67% of the pay, up to $840.70 weekly, with disability benefits making up the difference, which can be up to a maximum of $2,043.92 weekly, which would give you a total combined maximum possible benefit of $2,884 weekly. That's the maximum. There's no waiting period on this. If it happens and you qualify for it, you just get it. Your role in supporting this, whether you're self-insured, I don't really expect anybody on this webinar to be falling into that self-insured bucket. I'll just quickly mention, if you're a huge organization that has so much money, you can set up your own trust fund that can cover any illnesses or accidents, injuries. You can qualify to self-insure. That's not going to be most of us. That's like Amazon and people like that. But if you have insurance from an insurance carrier, you would talk to them about this. You would reach out to them just like any other claim or accident injury situation, and talk to them, talk to your carrier. That's probably one of the other big takeaways that I can give you during this webinar. You can't remember all this stuff that I'm sharing, all these slides, but I hope you will remember is reach out to the board and talk to us if you have questions, and talk to your insurance carriers. Get to know them, be aware of what kind of policies you're paying for, and ask them questions and reach out to them when you think you're going to need your coverage or when you think you need something from them. We have forms related to COVID-19 quarantine leave if this ever becomes an issue. That's available on our website at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov forms. And there's a lot more information there. Same website with a /COVID-19 at the end to get more information about, how you as an employer can navigate a situation if you have a COVID-19 outbreak at your workplace. And that's really kind of what it comes down to when people ask as an employer, one of my employees got COVID. How do I know if they got it at work? How do I know if it has anything to do with my workplace, or if they got it at home or on the weekends or at the bowling league or wherever? You're going to look at things like, was there an outbreak in your workplace? If a large number of your employees suddenly got COVID at the same time, you might want to look really carefully. Was there something going on, something happening in that workplace where these employees were being directed into a situation that was increasing their exposure? Those are the circumstances where, you might consider COVID-19 as a workers' compensation issue. So just again, on the paid family leave, we got more information on our website. I've just mentioned that website a bunch of times, probably more often than anything else. But again, this is still relatively new. Paid family leave has only been around for a couple of years, and we still get a lot of questions about it. We do have a helpline for paid family leave, and as I mentioned, there's an attorney on call every day for paid family leave, and they're very accessible. So if you have any questions about paid family leave at all, you can reach out to us and we'll get you squared away. I'm going to plug the onboard system. We are trying to modernize the Workers' Compensation Board like many other government agencies, particularly after the COVID experience and us having to really depend on technology. We do know that improving the way that we manage our business information at the Workers' Compensation Board is a very big priority. We're heavily invested in doing it to improve the experience of claimants and also business owners. So we'll see where that takes us, but we're trying to get better. Finally, I'm going to encourage you all to follow the Workers' Compensation Board. We're on, I guess it's not Twitter anymore. We call it X now. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We also have an email blast notification thing that you can sign up for at wcb.ny.gov/notify. You can stay on to in touch with us and get any kind of updates or information from the board that might be helpful to you. So I'll close up here with our information. That's our telephone number. That's the Advocate for Business telephone number, 518-486-3331. I'm going to warn you that, like, the way that it rings, because of the communications package we have here at the Workers' Compensation Board, it sounds like you're calling a call center, but it's not. You're going to reach one of the individuals that work directly here in this office, the Advocate for Business office, when you call that number. We also have an email address, advocatebusiness@wcb.ny.gov. You can shoot us an email anytime, and we'll get back to you right away. And our website, I like our website. The Workers' Compensation Board has a very good website. You can find the Advocate for Business on there in the search bar. There's also, when you get there, one of the tabs on the top is Employers. And you just go to wcb.ny.gov and click on the tab that says Employers, and you're going to access a ton of helpful information about insurance coverage requirements, workers' comp, disability, paid family leave. You're going to find a whole page that links to us and our activities and the things that we try to do here in the Advocate for Business office to help you all. So check it out. So I'm going to go to questions now. And hopefully we've got some questions.
We have a lot of great
Oh
questions.
my gosh,
actually.
A lot of questions. All right.
Yes.
Let's get to it, Jenny. Are you going to read it to us or what?
Yes. So first, a clarification. Is the owner or officer of a business allowed to file a workers' compensation claim?
If you have coverage as owner, right? If you opt in to get coverage for yourself, yes, that would be the situation where you would file a claim. If you don't have coverage for yourself, right? You wouldn't.
Yeah, if you exempted yourself as the owner or operator, you can always exempt yourself or include yourself on that policy. So that's the risk, like Anthony was talking about earlier in the presentation. For your employees, obviously you have to accept the risk, have the coverage. For yourself, you can kind of opt out of that, but there would be no coverage for you, and then it would not be picked up generally by your health insurance. So you have to be careful there.
Yeah, any individual can file a claim, even if you're not working for somebody, but that's going to go through this whole no insurance process. That's really going to come back to you as the employer, that you're going to end up paying for everything anyway. So there's really no value in if you're not covered by a policy, there's definitely no reason to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Is a business whose employees are 1099 or subcontractors required to have workers' compensation? So just clarifying that one more time, if you would.
Well, sure. That's the issue that we were discussing before. Like the 1099 alone, that's not going to cut it when it comes to workers' compensation. You're really going to look at the specific circumstances of the work that 1099 employee is doing. And there's a lot of nuance to it. You can go to our website. We have a whole checklist of like 10 items 10 questions you would ask about a specific employee and whether or not that they need to be covered or not if they're 1099. But really what it boils down to is the direction and control. The work that they're doing, who's telling them where to go and what to do is ultimately the person who's going to be responsible for their safety. Anything you want to add to that, Walt?
No, that's a complete answer. It's good.
Thank you. So this is a case of a certain business owner who is attending today that they work with sole proprietors and LLC companies and are being told that they need to cover their workers' compensation. But how do they handle that if they only use them for a small period of time? A month or a day or two? So how long of a period would they have to cover them?
So this is a sole proprietor hiring a little bit, or are you talking about a company that wants to hire a sole proprietor subcontractor?
So I believe that they meant a business that wants to hire sole proprietors and LLC companies.
Well, I guess really what it boils down to is as we mentioned, only those specific examples that we mentioned in the presentation would ever be exempt from workers' compensation coverage. You need to have workers' compensation coverage from the first day that an employee goes to work on the job. And you would cover them just for the amount of time. And I'm thinking off the top of my head, we just recently had the New York State Fair. All those vendors that came to do business at the fair for just the duration of the fair, they were all had to get a workers' compensation policy for the duration of the time that they were at the fair. And that again will be something that you would communicate with your carrier about. You would let them know, hey, I'm bringing on an employee, but I only intend to bring them on for this amount of time. And they should be able to take that into consideration when creating the policy for you.
Yeah, so not to get deep in the weeds, but if you're hiring, independent subcontractors or other sole proprietors, like in this example, what the insurance carrier does is when they do that payroll and premium audit at the end of your policy year as a hiring business, they're going to charge you premium for any uninsured subcontractors. So that's why we suggest that if you're hiring subcontractors, you make sure they get a policy, so you don't end up inadvertently paying for them. And then they get that policy in place, give you that certificate of insurance. So when you go through that payroll and premium audit at the end of your policy year, you can show that to your insurance carrier so that they will not go ahead and charge you premium for those uninsured subcontractors because they have insurance.
Excellent. So we have a couple of questions regarding online remote work. One is from an IT company that they started this year and wants to know how workers' comp is for remote work from home employees when there's no job site, but they are working from their own homes.
Yeah, they need to be covered. We've had this a couple times very recently, actually, where somebody hired an employee. They were an out-of-state employer. We'll use Massachusetts as an example. Their employee moved to New York State without their knowledge. Once they begin paying New York State wages to that individual, they need to have coverage, because if you're working, even though you're not in an office space, and it's probably going to become more common now with much more telecommuting and remote work, you're still on the job. So if you were at your computer sitting in Albany, New York, working for an out-of-state company, you develop carpal tunnel or something, that would be a compensable injury. And so you would need to have a New York policy.
That makes sense. So on that same line of questioning, an online tutoring company offering independent contracts would still have a mandate to carry workers' compensation and disability, correct?
Yeah, that was like
Yeah,
our
like our
example that we
like,
used in the presentation.
Usually
Okay.
the question is there direction and control? Like in that example of Jen, like she's going to tell the tutor where to go. And also they integral to the success of your business. Like Anthony said, just because you're paying them on a 1099, that's or Schedule C or what have you, that's more of a tax thing. But if they're integral to the success of your business, like if I hire you to sell steak knives and I'm the distributor, you're my employee, even if it's 100% commission, make your own hours, etc. That's one of the factors we look to in that 10 examples. Are they integral to success in businesses or direction and control, etc.
Excellent. Yes, so this poster clarified, so a mandate independent contractor company is what they were trying to type. So, okay. Regarding the actual poster that you are required to have in your place of business, do you need a new one every year? Or, and if so, how do you acquire one?
So the carrier should be sending you the posters that you need. It should be part of the documentation that you get just from getting a policy, and they should keep it up to date. If you don't get a new poster from your carrier, ask them, reach out to the carrier and ask them. And if for some reason your carrier cannot produce the certificate or poster that you need them to produce, they can reach out to us and we can get them the blanks that they need to produce and fill out for their employees. I I don't really understand how that happens, but it does. It does happen sometimes, and so we can help in those situations. And so that would be a question for your carrier. They are responsible for providing you the posters and also your certificates that you need to provide as proof that you have coverage. But if there's a situation where they can't, you can connect them with us here at the Advocates for All office. We actually monitor that request. There's a mailbox just for that, for insurance carriers to reach out and ask for blank certificate forms. And it's us who handle that. So we can definitely help take care of that situation if it happens.
Excellent. And so another clarification here. So the family leave insurance, that is a separate insurance than the workers' compensation insurance. They don't come like as a package or anything like that, correct?
That is correct. Typically, you get a workers' compensation policy and a disability policy as two separate policies, and the paid family leave is usually a rider on the disability policy.
Got it. Those classes that you mentioned to reduce premiums, do those have a fee associated with them?
So it's not a class. It's not a class. It's a program that you sign up for and you voluntarily implement the program. The Department of Labor has contractors that they associate with that are certified to be able to go out and do the inspections to make sure that your program is in compliance with what they need. And I do believe that you have to pay a small fee to that contractor who is certifying you. And that kind of really comes down to the determination of whether or not you really want to do it. Is your payroll large enough that the savings are worth it? But it's really, it's worth checking out. It's a phone call, it's an email, and the folks over there at the Department of Labor are extremely happy to help you with it. And again, we can help connect you with that if you want to know more.
So can business owners who get paid a W-2 salary for their full-time work from their own business also make use of paid family leave?
If they opt in. As we mentioned, if it's not done within the first 26 weeks of starting your business, you do have a waiting period before you can opt in again.
So the 5 days of required COVID-19 sick pay, can that be paid by the PFL policy instead of the employer paying wages for those days?
If you would want to put that in, in an email to us, we'll ask the PFL attorney, because I'm not 100% sure on that answer, so I don't want to.
I'm not really sure what the details are with the 5 days of required sick time. So I'm not really sure what the relationship would be between that and paid family, but I know our attorney of the day would know.
All right, so that one's an email question.
Yeah.
Do you have materials available in Spanish? And do any of the people from your office do these webinars in Spanish?
So we do have materials in Spanish. We have Spanish language brochures. I think they're on our website. I think you can link to them. We also have access to interpreter services that we connect when you call here. But at this moment, we don't have a Spanish-speaking presenter to present this presentation in Spanish, but that's not to say that I don't think we could find one. So if somebody on this call is interested and wants us to come and do a presentation to a Spanish-speaking audience, reach out and we'll find a way to make that happen.
And so a clarification on workers' comp and disability insurance. So which ones are required and which ones are not?
So they're all required. Workers' comp is required on the very first day that you go to work. You've got to have workers' compensation coverage for employees from the minute they start working for you. With the disability and the paid family leave, what is it? it's after 4 weeks, it's 30 days after the 4th week of employment.
Yeah, it ends up being like somewhere around like 40 days. So if you were only gonna have employees or an employee for, 28 days in a calendar year, you wouldn't need it. Or if you're an out-of-state company coming and sending an employee to New York State for less than 30 days in a calendar year, you wouldn't need the disability or paid family leave, but you would always need that workers' compensation insurance from the day you start payroll.
Right, a few questions to finish up then. If you pay a factory to make a product, do you have these responsibilities for their workers?
No, I wouldn't imagine, not if you're hiring a factory. That'd be the same thing as like contracting with somebody else. It's not a subcontractor, you're hiring the factory. The factory is going to be required to have workers' compensation insurance for all of their employees. If it's not here in New York, it's going to be elsewhere. I don't think I mentioned that in the presentation. Well, workers' compensation insurance is a state level requirement. So if you've got employees in New York State, you need to have a New York State workers' compensation insurance policy. Like if you're hiring workers who are in a factory in Connecticut, they're going to need a Connecticut workers' compensation insurance factory, that Connecticut business. If a business is in Pennsylvania or the employee, I should clarify, even if you're a business that's operating here in New York, but you have employees who are working in Arizona, you're going to have Arizona workers' compensation coverage for those Arizona employees.
Okay. So this question, if this person hires a sole proprietor with an LLC or S Corp, and they are exempt, opt out from workers' comp as owners of their companies, how does this get handled?
That's going to come back to that direction and control conversation. It depends on how are they conducting the work. If you're giving them, I need you to deliver this many widgets to me whenever. You can make the widgets whenever you want, however you want, wherever you want, that's on you. But if you're going to hire a company, you're going to say, I need you to clock in at this time of day and do this many of this particular item in this particular fashion, that's the direction and control item. Then they're not really an independent contractor anymore. They're not working independently. They're working under your direction and control. And then you would be required to have coverage for them.
With the remote work from home scenario, is there a way that the worksite safety review can still happen or not?
That's a great question. Probably better for the Department of Labor, who actually runs the program. But I would imagine yes. I don't know how that would go in your hiring process when you're trying to tell a remote worker, I want to hire you, but I want to inspect your house to make sure that you're safe and you're not doing anything wacky. But I would ask the Department of Labor. I'll reach out to them and talk to them. Like, how do they handle those situations? Can they do it?
All right, last question for today, and thank you. I know we're a few minutes over time, but like I said, we have had lots of great questions from today's attendees. As a startup business with no employees, are you required to complete and file a workers' comp CE 200 certificate of attestation form?
If you need to, that's what you would produce that in lieu of an actual certificate of insurance. If you needed to get a building permit, or if you were bidding on a government contract or something like that. Usually if you have to fill out a C200, it's because somebody's asking you for it. Somebody wants to see it. And if you qualify, and you are exempt from coverage, that is the time when you would fill out that form and produce it.
One business wouldn't give that to another business, though. It's just in, the government arena when you're getting any type of government permit, license, or contract, not from a subcontractor to the hiring business or something.
I can also plug that we also have on our website, on the Workers' Compensation Board website, you can check the coverage of any employer, including yourself, including any subcontractors that you want to work with. You can look them up. You can use this tool. It's on the website. You can look them up and see, does this business have coverage or not? And like I said, we've heard many cases, people where they use the debarment list as a vendor responsibility check. you can also just check coverage on yourself. I know particularly we joke about it here at the board, especially since I took this job as the advocate for business at the Workers' Compensation Board. I don't hire any contractors to come work at my house without double checking to make sure that they actually have the proper insurance for their business. And it's very easy to do. It's right there. If you go to the workers' compensation page, it's one of the first things that you see on there. One of the buttons to click is check, does my employer have coverage?
Excellent. Thank you, Anthony and Walt, so much for presenting today, and all of you for joining us. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the recording. And we kindly ask you to take a few minutes to give us feedback in the webinar survey that displays once we shut this webinar down, and that will be linked in that follow-up email. If you have questions related to this webinar, you can always reply to the follow-up email or get in touch with Anthony and Walt directly with the information they shared with you today. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.